Sounds and their effects. There are three major concepts to listening or to hearing and communication. In the Eastern way, Prakriti is the Srishti, and the Bhasha, the language, has got four distinct stages: the Para, Pashyanti, Madhyama and Vaikhari. Our spoken language is only the last one, the Vaikhari. And the music, the Sangeetam, with and without instruments accompanying. So these are the three concepts of sound. All these sounds you can hear. The Prakriti sounds you can hear, the Para, Pashyanti and last Vaikhari up to that you can hear, and the musical sounds. The sounds are classified as environmental, voiced or musical. Environmental is the Prakriti. Voiced is our speech, language. Then the musical sounds. A powerful means of communication. The sounds in any way, whether it is natural sound, whether it is a speech or language sound, or whether it is a musical sound, all are powerful means of communication. And this enables us to experience this world around us through the sound. So this is called the Shruti, because our sense of hearing allows us to gather, to process and interpret the sounds continuously and even without conscious efforts. We may take this special sense of communication for granted. Now, human communication is multisensory. It involves visual, tactile and sound cues. We discussed that in the structure of the brain. No? The range of the human hearing from just audible to painful hearing is over 100 trillion fold. Such a huge range. Tiny specialized cells within the inner ear, known as the hair cells, are responsible for converting the vibrational waves of sound into electrical signals that can be interpreted by the brain. Probably you have heard about ringing in the ears. It is called tinnitus. And this is actually a problem that originates in the brain, not in the ear. A recent study showed that men who do hunting experience, they have an increased risk of high-pitched hearing loss of 7% for every 5 years they hunt. Every 5 years, they lose 7% of high-pitched hearing. 95% of these same hunters report that they do not use hearing protection while hunting. So if you are not using hearing protection and use sounds like that of a gun, etc., this sort of thing can happen. Sensory research. Specialized nerve cells respond to different forms of energy. It may be a mechanical energy, it may be a chemical energy or an electromagnetic energy, and this energy is converted into electrochemical impulses that can be processed by the brain. The brain then works as the central processor of sensory impulses. It perceives and interprets them using a computational approach that involves several regions of the brain interacting all at once. This notion is different from the long-held view that the brain processes information one step at a time in a single brain region. Over the past decade, scientists have begun to understand the intricate mechanisms that enable the ear to convert the mechanical vibrations of sound to electrical energy, thereby allowing the brain to process and interpret these signals. Genes. The first gene associated with the hearing was isolated in 1993. By the end of 2000, more than 60 genes related to hearing were identified. In addition, scientists have pinpointed over 100 chromosomal regions believed to harbor genes affecting the hearing pathway. Many genes were first isolated in the mouse, and from this, the human genes were identified. Completion of the human and mouse genome projects are helping scientists to isolate these genes. Now, what is the practical use of this theory which we just spoke about? The rapid growth in our understanding is of more than academic interest. In a practical sense, sharing this information with young people can enable them to adopt a lifestyle that promotes the long-term health of their sense of hearing. How to keep their health of the sense of hearing? They can do that. That is the practical aspect. If they do not know that, they will expose themselves to unhealthy practices. With this in mind, we have to address several key issues, including what is the nature of the sound? What mechanism allows us to process sounds with great precision, from the softest whisper to the roar of a jet engine, from a high-pitched whistle to a low rumble? What are the roles of hearing, processing, and speaking in human communication? What happens when the hearing mechanism is altered or damaged? How does sound processing change? What can be done to prevent or accommodate damage to our sense of hearing? There are several misconceptions related to sensory perception and hearing. Number one is that people think that our senses provide a complete and accurate picture of the world. This is not so. Our ears do not produce the measurable sounds of their own that are normally inaudible to the brain. They might not be aware. Some of the animals actually use sound frequencies that are out of our hearing range. They are better than us. For example, whales, they communicate low frequency sounds that are inaudible to humans, and they can carry across vast expanses of ocean. Then, your ears produce sounds of their own that are normally inaudible to the brain. The senses react to only a limited range of the energy inputs available. Much sensory information exists beyond our ability to experience it. This is beautifully said in our scriptures, in Upanishads, etc. The Indriya, the senses are called the Indriya. Indriya cannot give you a full picture of the world. Our level of awareness is influenced by our individual abilities, our genes, our environment, our previous experiences, our interactions. That is the interactions between all these things. Learning about the limitation of our senses can help students to interpret their environment more accurately. Then, second misconception is that our senses function independently of one another. Because each sense is a specialized organ for a particular type of sensation, it doesn't mean that the senses function by themselves and do not interact with one another or with the rest of the body. We have already seen that in the picture of the brain I showed you in the last class. Research, however, reveals many interactions between these senses. During this module, you have learned about the sensory integration that take place in the brain. You saw that last day. Now, misconception 3. As we age, our brain networks become fixed and cannot be changed. Brain never stops changing and adjusting to its environment. This ability is important for acquiring new knowledge and for compensating for the deficiencies that result from the age or from injury. The ability of the brain to reprogram itself is called the plasticity. Special brain exercises or training techniques exploit the brain plasticity to help people cope with specific language and reading problems. Music therapy helps to do this type of, it's actually a special type of training technique, a self-healing training technique for reprogramming the plasticity of the brain. Regardless of the senses we use, understanding occurs in the brain. Whether we use the sign of language, the sign of the eye, the sign of the ear, that is Nama Rupa. Nama Rupaltmaga Prakriti. Nama is a sound. The ear hears it. Rupa is a vision. Nama and Rupa, a sign language. These are processed together to form the understanding. So you cannot Vagartha Viva Samprukto, the word and its meaning as a form, the imaginary, the visualization of a sound. This creates understanding. So that integration, it is an integration there. You cannot distinguish between Shruti and Darshana there. Both are the same. Then misconception 4, our senses do not really require any preventive maintenance. This is wrong. Since our senses function without any conscious input, and they are always being on, their function and health are not influenced by what we do. That is what people think. But it is not so. Like any other bodily system, the health of the senses is affected by the lifelong demands placed on them. So the biological mechanisms in which potentially harmful inputs can lead to both short-term and long-term hearing impairments, we should know. And simple, effective ways to minimize such harmful stimuli also you should know. That is all about music therapy. Music is preventing that sort of harmful stimuli. Major concepts related to hearing and communication, the scientific foundation for understanding of the anatomy, physiology and genetics of the hearing pathway, and the social and cultural aspects of human communication. Both are important. Both have scientific foundations. The following discussion is designed to introduce you to some major concepts about hearing and communication. One is communication is multisensory. As I said, Shruti and Darshana, communication with sound and vision occurs together. Then second is language acquisition, the imprinting and critical periods. Our brains have specific regions devoted to speech, hearing, language functions, bhasha. Sound has a physical basis. Nada is Akasha's guna, but it has a basis in earthly Panchabhuthatmaka Sharira. That is why you are able to produce a sound. That is how you communicate. Communication as an interaction between two or more living creatures. It involves much more than this. For example, we are constantly receiving information from and changing our relationship with our environment. This communication with nature is received through our senses of smell, taste, touch, vision and hearing. Communication with others make use of the vision, making eye contact or assessing a body language of a person. Then sound, the using of the speech or other sounds, even such as sounds like laughing and crying. When a group of people shares a need or a desire to communicate, the language is born. The most common human language is the language of words. Words may be communicated in various ways. They are usually spoken, may be written, may be finger spelled, and expressed through a sign language or mudra. Since the time of Plato, there has been debate over the nature of language in the Western world. Some believe that language is inborn and purposeful. Others think that it is artificial, arbitrary. Some consider language to be an evolutionary product, while others do not. It appears that words are not built into the brain because language is relatively recent evolutionary development in the Western world. I must say that because this is a Western theory, and also because languages differ substantially from one another, but all of them have one single root. That is important to know. Language and communication are made possible by specialized structures. We have evolved a sophisticated apparatus for both speech and hearing. Our brains have specific regions devoted to speech, hearing and language functions. Still, the mechanisms by which children acquire language are only partially understood. Now, in Malayalam there is a saying, Thalla valattumidam ulagam pochakkuttikku. Wherever the mother cat moves her tail, that is the entire universe for a kitten. In the similar way, in 1930s, Konrad Lorenz observed that newly hatched goslings would follow him rather than the mother goose if they saw him first. The first sight is the important thing. The period of imprintability may be very short, just hours for some species, but the imprinting which refers to the ability of the animals to learn rapidly at a very early age and during a well-defined period in their development. Imprinting generally refers to the ability of the offspring to acquire the behavior characteristic of their parents. Once it occurs, this process is not reversible. So whatever we learn in childhood, we say that chottaile sheelam chudala vare. In Malayalam, all these sayings are present. So these are not new concepts for us. Critical periods. The second concept is the critical period. A non-human example of a critical period is the limited time frame within which a male bird must acquire his song. For instance, a male white-crowned sparrow usually begins singing his full song between 100 and 200 days of age. By the time it is 100 to 200 days, it will sing its full song. A human being cannot do that, no? Proper song acquisition is needed for mating and for marking a territory for the bird. However, to learn his song, the young bird must be exposed to an adult bird song consistently and frequently between 1 week and 2 months after hatching. The white-crowned sparrow's critical period for song acquisition is that period. If it doesn't hear that song, it will not develop the full song. If the male sparrow hears the song only before or after the critical period, then he will not be able to learn the song correctly. So this is a very important concept. These examples demonstrate the brain's flexibility, its ability to be changed or to adapt to its environment. They demonstrate that an animal may alter its behavior or acquire a behavior that helps improve its chances for survival. Do animals have anything to teach us about our own acquisition of language? The answer seems to be yes. Consider the following. Scientists have reported that the seal pups learn to recognize their mother's voices within a few days of being born. This is important because the mother seals must leave their pups after roughly a week to go hunting. Upon returning, mother seals vocalize and wait for their pups to respond. By playing recordings of various females, the investigators determined that for the first few hours after birth, seal pups will respond to the voice of any adult female. However, after 2 to 5 days, the pups will learn to respond only to their mother's voice. Individuality has developed. Very soon after birth, human infants learn to distinguish speech sounds from other types of sounds. Within the next month or two, the human infant learns to distinguish between different speech sounds. An 18-month-old toddler can recognize and use the sounds called phonemes of his or her language and can construct 2-word phrases. A 3.5-year-old child can construct nearly all of the possible sentence types. From this point on, vocabulary and language continue to expand and be refined. So the first guru is always the mother and the father in language. The parameters of language development and developmental phases are under rigorous study. For ethical reasons, investigators cannot explore such questions through human experimentation that would deprive infants of language intentionally. Occasionally, however, unusual circumstances provide us with a glimpse of how humans acquire or do not acquire spoken language. There are examples of individuals who were not exposed to spoken language from birth, but who had normal hearing. Just like our story of the child brought up by a wolf, Chennaya Valarthiya Kutti. Those individuals never developed normal language or speech. Although such examples have been put forth as justification for the critical period hypothesis for language development, there are confounding issues. The possibility exists that these individuals had some type of brain abnormality that was responsible for their not acquiring spoken language. Nonetheless, the importance of sound as a stimulus for the hearing apparatus and its need to be processed by the brain for understanding is unquestioned. Communication is truly a multisensory experience. For most individuals, the pathway from creating sound, speaking as well as singing, to receiving, processing and interpreting sound. The hearing or Shruti is critical. This module focuses on the key issues of how sound is processed so that communication is achieved.